Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And welcome to the Dr. Will Show, where we talk about innovation, leadership, and becoming the CEO of you. Each week, I zoom in a thought leader, and we will chat about strategies that offer actionable steps to how you can live your best life. Welcome to season 4, people. Can you believe it? When I listening back to some of those old episodes in 2014, I was like, "Ooh." That kind of hurt a little bit, but we are back and having a great time in the new year. And today's guest is Dr. Josie Ahlquist. How are you doing, Doc?
Hello, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being the guest on the show. You came on my radar a couple of years ago via Ed and some other people who work in student affairs. And then I went on YouTube and saw you speaking. And I said, oh, okay, we share, similar research interests and you're doing it. I said, okay, we got to have you on the show. And now you're here. So thank you for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. If you hear this like really magical drizzle in the background, it's raining in Los Angeles. So there may also be people freaking out in the background audio because it doesn't rain often. But I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. So for those who will be watching this via video cast on YouTube or will listen on SoundCloud and iTunes, will you please introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Josie Ahlquist. I'm based in Los Angeles, but I also spend a large majority of my time on United Airlines as I travel as a speaker and consultant. I help college students, administrators, faculty, and executives with humanizing and maybe empowering how they use digital social media tools. And I'm also affiliated with Florida State University. I'm a research associate and instructor in their Leadership Learning Research Center. And that's where I got to kickstart my curriculum to help college students lead in digital spaces. And so I get to wear a lot of different hats. It's really fun. And some of that's research, some of that's speaking, podcasting, blogging, the whole gamut.
Excellent. So I like to ask people this because I'm always interested in who the individual is as a person and not necessarily the job title. So who is Josie Ahlquist and how did you get started in this? And please go into the work that you do as a consultant, researcher, and professor.
Sure. Well, the big who question. Wow, I don't know if you're ready fully for that, but you could probably dig up some of my old blogs to like really get deep and personal. I get pretty personal on Instagram. I'm kind of like a soft spot for that platform. I grew up in Wyoming in a very, very small town. Families come from ranching families and everybody knew everybody. And I think that's what I love about social is you can still have that next door neighbor feel, but you don't have to be in the same town. And can really, I believe, make real connections even on a platform like Twitter. I somehow found my way to Los Angeles, unbeknownst to my family. They're like, what are you doing? The largest city in the world. In the early 2000s, after I got my master's in higher education, I focused on student affairs. I just fell in love with the college environment when I went to college. And I was like, oh, I want to stay here the rest of my life. And they're like, you should get a job here. I was like, fantastic. So my first jobs were out in Los Angeles doing student activities, residence life. And in the midst of that was really the boom of social media from MySpace to Facebook. And I just embraced it not only as a person, but in the workplace and having conversations with my students, how we could incorporate it into marketing and building community. And then that led me to when I got my doctorate, not only my passion in leadership education and serving students, but in all these unanswered questions about social media, and that really fueled the research agenda. But as you can find on my Instagram feed, there's many other parts of me. I'm going on my third triathlon. I haven't signed up for the third one, but I've set a goal that I'll probably do number 3. I've got 2 rescue dogs that probably look bigger than me in photos, and a cat who runs the house. And then I have this amazing partner who does YouTube videos and music, and that's in the background. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see some of his stuff. I'm in his studio recording because the dogs would be very loud right now if I recorded inside the house. So I'm recording from his studio.
So your research focuses on leadership in the digital age. What exactly is digital leadership, and what made you embrace social as a leadership tool?
Well, taking it back to when I was getting my doctorate at California Lutheran, and you know this as a doctor, when you are immersing yourself in the research, you're looking for holes and pockets, both in scholarship and in practice and in pedagogy. And I came in with this love of leadership. Like, I'll read any book on leadership or get involved in any types of leadership education with students or even up to executives that I could. And then when I looked at, well, how are we educating about social media? Because a lot of these theories and curriculum practice were created when there wasn't, or even if it wasn't part of the equation of how that theory or framework was created. And then even down to the small details of, well, what programs are being offered on campuses, in classrooms, in executive programs about not just social media strategy, but the human side of tech. And specifically with social media, it's so personal. And we're asking people, and especially executives and professionals, to potentially take on different methods of putting themselves out there without any real guidance. And the guidance I found, especially for students, was one of sometimes shame and silence, or at least that's how they explained it to me when they were educated as kids. And even early college students, it was a whole list of what adults and educators wanted them not to do. And so they were kind of left to their own devices to be like, well, what should I do on social media? And for me, that started to explain some behaviors, either in acting out or going to private spaces like Snapchat, or now we see Finstas, fake Instagram accounts, which aren't even fake. They would call them their realist accounts they have, because they can make them so private and actually really share their full selves. So when I say leadership, it's both in seeking of this philosophy and embracing the notion that we all can make an impact both in physical and digital spaces. But it also recognizes the human side, with both philosophy and strategy, that I think hasn't been connected between leadership sits over here and technology sits over here. And unless you happen to be in a campus role like a chief information officer, or you're running social media, those types of connections probably really don't weave in your job description, or definitely not in like your grad prep program or your meetings, or your professional development. And so I'm trying to cast a wide net. And what I'm finding is it looks different for everybody. And that's good, because digital leadership should be really personal and genuine, and has a long-term aim to it. That it's not just, on the surface level, likes and comments and followers or brand. What do you hope to get out of these platforms? And for leaders, I believe you want to make a difference and an impact and influence positive change.
And it's interesting you say that. And earlier you mentioned how, Instagram, you share a certain aspect of yourself. And I know later on we're going to sort of get deeper into that, but we live in an age where you have to be not only aware of what you post or like or retweet online, but you have to, even more than ever, realize how you live your life offline can be put online by either friends, family, or some bystander who may catch you somewhere where, you think I'm in Cabo, so, I'm gonna, maybe I'm gonna get in this twerking contest. And, you're thinking, hey, but someone can take a picture of that. Someone can take a video of that,
right,
pop it on Instagram, and now your reputation has a stain on it because, Dr. So-and-so was caught twerking, at such and such place. And I ask you that because, every one of us, I guess, has a starting point or a reference point for how we start online or how we should behave. So what were your first experiences in using social media, and how have you been able to use social networking sites like a Twitter or a LinkedIn to connect with other individuals in your field?
This is such a good question. And I missed MySpace in college by just a few months. And blessed be, because I got to do things in college that probably students don't now, or at least they have to be so much more aware and cognizant. And maybe that's a good thing, that now there's these additional layers of reflection of we are held accountable to behaviors. Even if we're physically not posting something, it could be posted at any time. I mean, even recording devices, for goodness sake. So I think we are getting to a place where we all have to get up to speed in our own congruence. And what's difficult is young adults and teens are going through developmental processes where they're pushing boundaries, they're figuring out their identities in a very public sphere now, whereas I could be a bit more protected, honestly. Mistakes that I made, choices that I made, even though maybe I was held accountable to them in different functions, I was never given even the choice to, well, do I want to share this out into the world? I don't know if I would have or not, if I was at that Cabo, whatever. But now those are daily. Ooh, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry. My internet went out for a minute. So those are daily choices that young adults are faced with. Not just young adults, all people. Like every post we make, we have to own it, and not just post anything we choose to do in our lives. And that also comes with a lot of pressure. And why you might find some users of all ages acting out or not using their real names, or maybe not even being active on different social media platforms. Struggled. So Facebook and the election was difficult for me. And I do think that others in many different fields experienced similar frustrations, where all of the different communities that we have existed with in our lives, from my family and friends back in Wyoming, or those who I went to high school with, who are now dialoguing, debating, and having screaming matches with those that have maybe different sets of values or viewpoints that work in higher education. And in no other context would they ever have intersected, but now on my Facebook feed they are. And that's complicated, and that impacts us as people. And some of these platforms we don't have control completely over. So I think we're getting to a place where I'm not just going out and telling people, you need to get on Twitter and Instagram and beef up your Facebook, XYZ. I honestly think we're at a place of almost like auditing and reflecting and adding more congruence into our lives as people, not even thinking about us as professionals or brands or whatnot. But at the same time, I know the reason why I still am a cheerleader for the platforms is, again, from my own personal experiences, that I know if it wasn't for blogging and Twitter, I would not be doing what I'm doing today. I know the value, and not just because that I do social. I know in many other different industries, tapping into these tools is priceless. Like, you don't need to take out a small business loan or put out an ad on billboards or take out newspaper ads. Like, and this is the type of stuff that I'm telling students all the time, like the access that they have, if they're just tweaking their presence slightly on Twitter, could be so extremely powerful. Because sometimes if they've grown up with the tool, they maybe stop realizing like how, like, it's like if you've been driving a car your entire life, sometimes we actually forget the power behind it, like actually life or death in this car, right? Until you have an accident and you realize like the significance of this thing that you're driving around. So I see both sides of it. I think it's very important to recognize both sides, that technology is both a win and sometimes a worry. And so we have to be very aware of how we enter these spaces.
Mm-hmm. And it's so powerful because we no longer live in a world where you have to ask for permission. So if you want to write a book, beforehand, you have to send off all these letters and your manuscripts to these publishers and hope someone says yes. But now you can publish that thing yourself and put it on the Kindle. And whether 5 people buy it, it's still out there.
Right.
And Chance the Rapper won a Grammy, right? He doesn't have a record deal. Right. His stuff, he puts that out online and now it's there. So that's what I love about how powerful it is and how much a part of our lives like this stuff has become. So I remember when the internet went out at our home, like we're having problems. And I was like, man, I can't Netflix. I can't do all these things. Like, what am I going to do? Because it's just such a part of how we live.
Absolutely.
And you're on, and it's odd because you work at a university where you would think be a lot of innovation and people are just so ready to explore and jump into new ideas. But in a lot of ways, it's a very traditional. And I bring that up because I want to know what goes into the mental shift for someone who is used to leading a group of people from an office, from a campus, and now they're leading this organization within this digital space to now they're representing a university, they're representing themselves. What goes into that shift from what I do stays here versus now whatever I say, whatever I do, it's out there and you can't take it back?
I think going back to what I had shared before, that we have to own everything that we say and do and post. And that may be a big shift for different generations or experiences. And we really start to wander into different boundaries now that might make some people uncomfortable. And I think that's a lot of times the reason why I get pushback from some executives or even different educators is the ability to share, especially like real time, could give someone anxiety, both in that they don't understand the tool, but also maybe they would define it, they're more of a private person. And the book that I'm working on, and my publisher found me because I was so much an open scholar, basically. So there's the value there. The book is going to include experiential activities that I believe you need to put yourself through. And that's, again, where I call it kind of leadership development, because these tools are free to set up and run and be active on. But I do think we got to do some work on self to answer the questions of like the real why you're on there, who you want to connect with, how far you're willing to share content. So then you don't have that, oh gosh, I made that choice. Not like so much you regret it, but I get this question a lot of like, oh, should I friend students on Facebook? Facebook, not so much anymore. Maybe now it's like Instagram, because that's where more college students are. And with college, it's easier than K-12. K-12, if they're under 18, I think that I think individuals, and sometimes via contracts, it's pretty black and white, but at least in the university setting, it's a lot more gray. And we work so hands-on with students. We go on international trips with them and have these like real intimate experiences with immersions. And so it's much more gray and complicated. So I think individuals need to sometimes sit with these questions in their choices in kind of like digital decision making. And sometimes that comes in with the philosophy of what's the impact that you're hoping to make, short term and long term. Because I always say, like, well, make the choice, test it out. And then if you're not sleeping at night because of that choice, like, get out of there. Or like, you know, shift gears, because we all need to sleep at night. Like, social media should not keep you up at night. I am an advocate, though, of connecting with students, like maybe not going out and friending all of them, but allowing yourself to be accessible can be really powerful for young adults that are, I believe, really seeking role models in digital spaces as well as like physical in-person leadership.
So what are some of the missteps people make on social? And I saw that smile on your face. And how much of oneself should they share online? And here's the kicker: how do you decide how much or how little of your life to share on social media?
Good questions. Well, I would say the number one misstep is just not being online whatsoever. Like, that was what first drove me to do research and consulting with not just students, but educators and executives. Was I saw a divide, those that were embracing it and doing amazing things like on Twitter or blogging, and other executives, vice presidents, presidents that just would put the kibosh on it. Like, it was such a hard line for them. And I found some of that's personality, some of that's skill, and some of it's just their own perception. Like, they just haven't given it a chance and knowledge. And luckily, we're seeing more and more individuals at all levels within education diving into the space in a variety of ways. So it's not just like a cookie cutter, this is how you can be active as a president, or, you know, even as a coordinator on a campus. And so I think that can be powerful. But I think we also need more people, I guess, kind of like me, to encourage people one-on-one, especially at those executive levels. And I think the next mistake is that people don't set up boundaries within technology and time. From our phones to our iPads to our multiple devices that we have. We do need to recognize the impact that they have on us, and calling for a bit more holistic wellness, or at least consciousness of how we're being impacted by these different tools, because we work in a field of giving and of serving people, which can already be very consuming on us. And social could both be a giver and a taker. And I just want to make sure, especially the work that I do with students, is they add a bit more radar of their understanding of how they might be impacted by the tools. And then, of course, there's extremes to everything, like people that are posting way too much, or they're scrolling too much, or they want too many likes. Like, you know, a glass of wine is wonderful, but an entire bottle of wine is a bad idea, right? So anything in, we have to keep any behavior in check. But as far as missteps, I think those from students to executives, they just may not realize just how public these platforms are, even when they have their accounts on private. Again, like the car example, we forget sometimes the power of a car until it breaks down or we get in an accident. So we may forget the power of texting someone or emailing, realizing like, oh, wow, that's an artifact. Like, that just doesn't go away, right? So we because we're moving at such a quick pace, both with change and just the work we're trying to accomplish, we have to make sure we keep that awareness on. But honestly, the types of posts and choices that tend to, like I say, are newsworthy, right? That we see someone went viral. It wasn't because they just forgot, right? It was for me, not only were they not educated about how public the platform was, but I think it goes back to character education and leadership education. Like, it's not just the tool, it's the person. Like, there's some gaps in education, awareness, that they need in their life. Like, it's not just one thing or another. And so again, that's where I'm trying to make the connection with the tool, with other tactics of things like character education, in K-12 digital citizenship that's used. I found, at least in the college environment, using the terminology and philosophies of leadership tends to resonate more with students as well as administrators.
Mm-hmm. So how do you decide how much to share? Because I follow you on, I've looked at multiple platforms you're on, and I can see that on Twitter, you share this. On LinkedIn, you share this. On Instagram, you share that. So how do you decide, I'm going to share this of my vacation, or I'm not going to share this of my vacation, or this is going on in my life at home, or I'm not going to do that? Are you just sort of, this is who I am? Or is there any thought before you go, I don't know. So what goes through your mind? How do you decide how much of your personal life that you will actually share online?
That's a great question. And I think it evolves over time, and it always should, based on just what's going on in our lives, like if we're busy or just where we are in our mental state. What I found as someone that wants to be approachable and engaged and authentic is people want to connect with people, like real, and the ups and the downs. And so there's different platforms that, for me, honestly, I'm more comfortable doing that. Like, it would be weird if I shared certain things on LinkedIn, at least right now. Like, I could post photos about my dogs or like a hard day I had, but it doesn't really fit into the context or the architecture of that platform. So I also try to be really aware of the audience and what people are expecting on those platforms. I am finding, and I can even look in my analytics about this, that I have a pretty large audience of 18 to 24-year-olds that follow me on Instagram. And so that is a different way that I am choosing to engage in that space, knowing that a lot of the students that I talk to at like in keynotes and workshops when I go to campuses or conferences, I'll let them know I'm on Instagram and they follow me immediately. And then they're like, are you going to follow me back? I was like, yes, let's do this. Because again, they're really wanting role models and real people to look up to, and not just Beyonce. I mean, even though we all should look up to Beyonce, but like someone that they actually met, and like, I know their story and now they know a little bit of mine. So that's why I try to be even in a very public, open platform where I don't know everyone that's following me, I have found value of sharing and being reflective on Instagram, even in comments. Like, those are highly engaged with. And I even find myself, others that I follow, it's great to see the visual, but then to have some reflection behind it, I think is valuable. I mentioned before about Facebook, and I've honestly, a lot of professionals or just people I'm talking to now, like with the election, I think it just kind of for me at least, it shifted how much I choose to share, even just on my personal page, because the network is so vast from so many different pockets. So I'm sharing there. I'm connecting there. Like, if I'm not posting, my mom is like, where are you, Josie? Like, where's your post lately? And so I would definitely say the priority is like those that I'm really closely connected with, but I'm connected with lots of different colleagues in that space as well. And Twitter is where I go to learn. I want to share knowledge, things that I think is interesting. But from the very start, Twitter has been my library of just a vast amount of network and knowledge, from Twitter chats to hashtags, to live streaming now. I don't go in there lightly. Like, I know if I'm going into Twitter, I'm going to probably take a deep dive and be there for a while, where sometimes like on Instagram and Facebook, I can pop in and out a little bit easier. So each platform kind of fits a different need and season for me, for sure.
I love Twitter. Love it so much. I wrote my dissertation on teachers using Twitter for professional development.
Great.
It's one of those places where I really do. I am my whole person. I bring everything I am there. We just finished a bathroom reno, so I would take a couple of photos and say, "Oh, this is the stage of the reno," with my community. Of course, I'm there for the learning, and I try to drop any tidbits of wisdom that I think I have there. But I'm very clear cut in what I do not share and how I carry myself. So anything that goes on home, between my wife and I, does not meet Twitter, unless it's like, oh my gosh, my wife told me, she was, oh, wait in the car, I'm going to get this dress. And 45 minutes later, here she comes. Now that's, that's nothing real private, but anything else, of course, I'm not going to share that. And my political views, I'm there, but I don't take it out of calling people outside of their names. Even though I do not like the man in office, I do not call him certain names, because whatever I say will become a part of record of who people may think that I am.
Right.
So I'm very cognizant of my brand, because there are certain career moves I want to make, and I don't want anything messing with my money. So I, that's how I do. And I love LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is where I get that bread and butter, some of that juicy professional business information.
Yep.
That is my joint. Not on Instagram that much. Instagram will wear that battery down a lot. So actually I took the app off my phone because it was getting me.
I did that with Snapchat. It just wasn't fueling me enough. It just kind of felt like, I don't know, just like busy work, or it was just skimming the paper. I was like, this isn't, but we got to make those choices for us. And I think are already kind of experimenters. We're willing to kind of jump onto anything and make the choice for you, like what feels like it fits your personality, and what you're wanting to put out there. But I find so many people are just consuming on these platforms, where within this idea of leadership, like we all have perspective and personality, and especially within educators, I'm trying to remind them that you have expertise. Like your boss may not make you feel like you do, or the students you serve, but you have knowledge that other people need. And that's honestly something I had to always remind myself every blog I put out, because I would be terrified. But we need to openly share our knowledge, because I believe in this economy, that's what's going to further elevate and amplify what we're trying to do in education beyond those that are in public office. That's what's going to move curriculum along, and hopefully, help each other as professionals. Curriculum both also for students, but also like in undergrad and grad programs, they're not keeping up that great. So jump onto Twitter, or read somebody's latest blog, because that's real time. That's not gone through the curriculum committee and then got lost in the mix on the campus. They're trying their best. But I think we hold a lot of value that we could be sharing more of.
Awesome. So, you have this dope podcast, and I love the interviews. I love the graphic. Y'all, that graphic, I looked at, I said, ooh, this is so professional. But I'm not worthy. And I created podcasts. Was quite, because I knew that I needed to create content to craft my digital footprint, right? So because I Google myself, and I know that other people would Google me as well. So I wanted to make sure that when that happened, content that I created was the content that came up in the top of the search. Yep. And after doing it, I love it. I'm enjoying having these conversations. I'm like, yes. So what, out of all the things that you are doing, what made you take the leap into podcasting? And what is your show about?
So, Josie and the podcast, I kicked off last fall. I actually had a really hard time coming up with the name, and I put it out to the internet to help me like make choices. And I mean, it was loud and clear. That was the best choice because my name has many different associations from, this one's Josie and the Pussycats.
Yeah, cartoon.
And so, yeah, I got to play with that. So the logo actually is a play on even the logo of Josie and the Pussycats. So luckily within marketing, I could kind of play, which I also figured out, there's like another logo that kind of looks like that too. But anyway, it's all good. It's recognizable. And I usually have a idea for about a year until I actually implement it. And sometimes I get really hard on myself, like, why can't I get this off the ground? But I've finally embraced this because it's one thing, especially, in podcasting, which is so much work, to just turn around and do something on the fly and it kind of going okay, or maybe like you try it and then you stop. Because we see so many podcasts that do this. Because again, it is a lot of work. My desire to start a podcast was because I was getting a little burned out of blogging. Because I still publish in journals and I'm working on books, I was feeling tapped out, but I still really wanted to share content. And I knew people craved it. So I looked out into the digital storytelling sphere of well, what's out there? What are platforms? Because I wasn't even listening to podcasts at the time. It's kind of hilarious. I wasn't even a consumer of it, which has drastically changed. And I think I'd still love to do YouTube and videos at some point, but it was just too intimidating. So podcasting kind of felt like it fell in the middle somewhere. And while I do have a very fun and outgoing personality, I wanted to learn from other people. I wanted to feature their stories. And what I didn't realize at the time is just how much I, as the interviewer, would learn and grow from doing them. And not just in the interview, the process of editing and preparing the episode, because I do reflection at the beginning and the end. And so I would put myself through this really interesting process that I didn't realize I would be going through at the time. And anything from topics about social justice and identity to, social media strategy, all these different topics that all kind of fed into the mission of the show. And it's going really well. And we're heading into another half of the season, and it's just been a wonderful addition to, I guess you could say, my library that I'm putting out there.
It's really a nice podcast. I am just a junkie, and I have, of course, on my phone, I have them on the tablet, and have an Apple TV, so it's there too. So when I'm getting ready in the morning, I listen to podcasts because I try to get pumped up to go to work in the morning. So I really love it. And you can listen to it in the car. So it's a great way to, get that knowledge and entertainment at the same time. Your podcasts have a lot of different topics, whether you're interviewing college president, you find your niche to other people you speak to. How do you decide sort of which topics you're going to cover? And what is your process for finding your guests?
Well, I think at the basis of it, I'm looking for someone that is focused on whatever it is that they're doing. If it's in higher education, if it's in marketing, if it's in government, that they're pursuing something very clear. And they are also embracing technology and social media. And that's where I'm finding there's just so many different ways that digital leadership is coming out in individuals and in different industries. And so that's why I want to talk to a current college student and a campus president and, vice presidents and K-12 educators, because it all looks a little bit different. We're all looking for role models and examples, because even things that I shared today about my process, about what I share or not, may not resonate with somebody. And I haven't found that pushing someone onto a platform just because of somebody else does it for this reason, that's not going to make it stick. So I want to share a lot of different stories. So for example, Dr. Walter Kimbrell, the president from Dillard University that I interviewed last fall, he really embraces the idea of him being a thought leader and a very public, open persona with a very strong opinion, from his Twitter account to when he goes to the White House. Like, and not all presidents carry that and wouldn't be comfortable with that either. So I also immediately think about, how do I show the other end of the spectrum? So it is a president that's active in digital spaces, but it looks different. And maybe it's not as amplified, but it's still making a really big impact. And I also, it's really important to me to find an array of experiences in backgrounds, ethnicities, positions. Like, I sometimes find in student affairs, especially, we're tapping into the same people over and over. So I don't know if it's like this in K-12 or other spots, but you see the same people all the time. And I love those people that I always work with, especially that have been doing this work in tech a long time. But I think people are craving more than that. And so I'm honestly, like, I get probably asked a lot more to be on my podcast than I actually say yes to. Like, I'm probably more going to go find them them being asked of me, if that makes sense. Because I'm really particular. And I don't do that many episodes because I get them professionally edited. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I want them to be really, really high quality. And I do think that's why they've been so successful. Not to say not all of them have been perfect audio, but quality matters in podcasting. When you're just listening when you're just listening, you can tell a difference. And I want that to be a quality experience, because then I think people will really hear the message a little bit more.
So yeah, in K through 12, it's the same thing, especially, in my particular area of ed tech, whether it's at conferences or blogs or podcasts, they're just rehashing, recycling the same folks. Mm-hmm. And please don't get mad at me, people, when you hear this. I know some of you are my friends, but they just keep popping up. And I admit I've had a couple on my show, but for me, I made it a point to say, I'm going to do this podcast not only for myself, but I want to provide value to other people. So my podcast isn't the typical K through 12 podcast. And even now, starting season 4, it's going to even be more of a shift away from what I was doing before. And as you mentioned earlier about bringing these different voices, I remember looking at my blog, and I was looking at the pictures of the people, and I was like, well, people of color. And then it hit me. I said, I have to do better. Okay, so now I have to go out there and not just sort of grab, quote unquote, name folks, and really look to try to amplify other people's voices who have the experience and bring them to the table and share their stories to my audience. And then that paid out in huge for me. So I was about to say, oh, it kind of brought my head for a split second. I almost said hugely. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't go there. Can't go there. Y'all know who I'm talking about. I can't go there. Yeah. But yeah, dividends, it just paid off huge for me. So,
well, I do think we have a responsibility as content creators. I'd rather call myself like a researcher or consultant over like a thought leader or an expert. Whatever you call it, like we are creating platforms and amplifying messages. And we do have to be aware of who we're shining a light on, both in who needs a microphone put in their face, and who might need it pulled back a little bit. And so I know those that were the ones that put a microphone in my way, and I am so grateful to them. But I also know that I need to do the same, that I need to, and reaching out to ensure that holistic view of all types of different voices in education and other fields. So yeah, I do think it's something for us to be aware of.
Mm-hmm. So what is your call to action for educators who they're not on Twitter, they're not on LinkedIn, or maybe they're there, but they aren't engaging? They just have an account. How important is it for them to now create the account, engage, and actually start to put in the work to build their online presence?
Right. Well, so the first level is those that just aren't on at all. And I can attest from my own experience with Twitter, when I first got on, it is not the most user-friendly platform. It moves very fast. It's got coded language from hashtags to, like @ symbols. So that may require some guidance that isn't just some YouTube tutorial. Find somebody from your family to friends to somebody at your campus or school that might kind of guide you a little bit. Because it took me about 3 people to finally figure it out. And once you finally are on, it is okay just to lurk and learn. Just pay attention to the platform, and specifically find 5 people that are currently at your job level. That you see as peers that are active in the space, and learn from them. Who are they following? What are they sharing? Who they're connected with? Down to what their bio is. And same with LinkedIn, like all these different platforms, we can observe each other's choices and think about how those would fit into our own kind of philosophy. And then find 5 people that are kind of at your aspirational level. What's the next step in your career? And pay attention to how they're using it. You actually might find, for example, let's say you want to be a vice president next or a superintendent. You're having a hard time finding those. So that actually might be something you just need to be aware of. Well, it seems like this level in the field, they are way less active than over here. So what is that transition going to look like when I'm going through that recruitment process? Or maybe you find it's a different style of tweeting or how they create their bio or who they're connected with. And I created a list on Twitter that's every single college president I can find, whether they just created the account and forgot about it or they're tweeting 12 times a day. And I find it's so popular for people to follow, not only just being curious, but for those that aspire to be that someday. You can literally go to my list and just watch the feed of presidents on Twitter, which is just so fascinating and inspiring. But what better way to learn what it actually is like to be a president for a day than watching that feed? So you could do that in any position that you are aspiring to next. And then don't discount what these platforms can be outside of work, because that might be the thing that actually keeps bringing you back. So the Golden Globes were last night. If you're really into pop culture and movies, follow some accounts that connect with that in your hobbies. Or you want to make sure that you're laughing in your feed. So you follow Saturday Night Live or a late night show or something like that. Like, your feed can be holistic. It can really be curated for you. So I would first think about who you want to follow before you even think about what it is you're going to put out into the world. Because I actually find the latter will come once you start paying attention to what's actually the architecture going on the platform.
Excellent. So this has been an awesome conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But before we go, how can people work with you?
Well, you can find me at josieahlquist.com. I offer consulting, both long-term, short-term, as well as speaking engagements for college students, administrators, and faculty. And then if you're interested in any of my publishing work within scholarship, that's on the website too. There's a couple books that I've been part of. You can find out more about that research. Josie and the podcast is on all the podcasting platforms that you know and love. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of those at Josie Ahlquist.
Excellent, excellent. So people, you know how we do this. This is the video cast will be on YouTube. I'm going to share this on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. I am also going to put the audio podcast on SoundCloud and iTunes. Please subscribe, leave a review. I want to thank you, Dr. Josie Ahlquist, for being a guest on the show.
Pleasure.
You are welcome. So people, as always, invest in you, EDU, and this season 4, I'm telling you, it's going to be popping like hot grease. Until next time, peace.